This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
أهلا بكم. في اليوم التاسع عشر من الحرب على لبنان مجزرة.
On the 19th day of the war on Lebanon, an Israeli massacre took place in Qana, which had already suffered a massacre a decade ago. It was an unusual bloody day in Qana. The day started by an Israeli bombardment that targeted buildings used by Lebanese refugees, killing more than 60 people. Most of the victims were women and children. During early hours, the Israeli forces fired more than 50 artillery shells at a three-story building in Qana, causing the building to collapse on top of the refugees who'd been escaping Israeli bombardment.
It was 1 a.m. in Qana, and then time froze. More than half of the victims were children, and the majority of the children were among the dead. Some of the children were infants who had not seen anything in life except war and the sound of artillery. At least 3 of the children were only a few months old. Their childhood did not spare them from the harsh reality of war. The victims spent most of the morning hours under the piles of the collapsed building. Some of them were left without help for even more hours. Some families were entirely wiped out. However, it is much worse when only one sibling from an entire family survives.
I have 2 sisters in the hospital. One of them sustained head injuries. I don't know the extent of her injuries.
Were you present during the raid?
Yes, nearly 20 children were killed. My cousin, his wife, and his 5 children were also killed. My family and 5 of my siblings were also killed. I do not have anyone left except my cousin, my father, and 1 brother. Thanks a lot to Condoleezza Rice for doing this to us. Our homes were destroyed. We don't have a home anymore.
Like many other families, this family used to live a happy life. It's comprised of a mother, a father, and 2 children, Hassan and Zainab. Zainab was killed. Fearing for their son's health, the family has not told Hassan of his sister's death. However, Hassan has the feeling that something bad had happened to his sister because people cried when they talked to him over the phone. Hassan's mother was able to save her son and her partially paralyzed husband. However, she regrets the loss of her daughter.
I found a child's hand that was in an upright position. I caressed it, thinking it was my daughter's. I kissed and patted the hand again. I cannot lift you up. I do not have the strength to do so, and I do not know how. I hand you over to the Honorable Zainab, because my daughter's name was Zainab. I named her after the Honorable Zainab. Peace be upon her. Zainab will take care of her.
The paralyzed father refused to talk about sadness and sorrow. He said that it was a battle of steadfastness.
We will not give up our dignity, honor, land, and rights. As I stated a few moments ago, we have rights and we will not give them up. We either live free and proud or die. We do not have another choice.
The southern Lebanese have 2 choices. Some may accept a 3rd choice, which they may not find. The eyes of the southern Lebanese, which have been shedding tears since the Israeli attack on Lebanon, waited for the night to doze off between raids. However, in the wake of the Qana massacre, it will be very difficult for these eyes to close, fearing of a new massacre that may unfold during the night. Abbas Nasir, Al Jazeera, from in front of the Jabal Amal Hospital, Tyre, southern Lebanon.
On the 20th day of the Israeli aggression on Lebanon, the Israeli Navy bombed a Lebanese army position south of Tyre, injuring 4 soldiers, 1 in critical condition. The Israeli attack coincided with talks between the French Foreign Minister, Philippe Douste-Blazy, and the Lebanese government about a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah.
فيما لا تزال دماء مجزرة قانا ساخنة والعديد من جثث الأطفال تحت الأنقاض مع تداعيات هذه. The blood of the Qana massacre victims is still warm, and many of the children's bodies are still under the rubble. But military confrontations in some points in the south continue. Israeli warplanes continued to hover over many areas, including Beirut and Baqa, but they did not drop bombs on Lebanon for the first time since July 22nd. This gave an opportunity for the Lebanese to transport hundreds of families that could not get out of the death zone. This also allowed for political discussions that are aimed at reaching a ceasefire to continue. The statements of the French Foreign Minister, Philippe Douste-Blazy, who arrived to Beirut, shows that France has a different position than that of the United States, though he acknowledged the limited impact of his country's position. كان الوزير الفرنسي اعترف بمحدودية تأثير موقف بلاده.
We are still trying to reach a ceasefire. We truly need to put an end to what is happening. France is very interested in ending the status quo. France wants to help Lebanon in the UN or at any other level.
وإذا كان الطيران الحربي الإسرائيلي قد جمد ضربات.
The Israeli warplanes have suspended their airstrikes on the south of Lebanon and the southern suburb of Beirut, but fierce battles are still ongoing at close range in Marj al-Ain, where Israel is trying to advance from the areas of Mitalli and Sali al-Halla towards the southern Baqa. This means that the situation may escalate to the regional level. It seems that Israel is trying to achieve success in this area to compensate for the defeats it sustained in Bint al-Jabal and Maron al-Ras.
في بنت جبيل ومرون الراس.
لقد قمنا بجميع الاتصالات.
We have had all kinds of contact with foreign ambassadors and heads of state for the sake of having the UN Security Council hold an emergency session and pass a resolution calling for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire.
أقل من هدنة وترقب ما بعد الهدنة حيث التوقعات تتجه.
Despite talks about the ceasefire, some predict that the military confrontations will become fiercer. All people are looking towards the United Nations Security Council in New York, which may set preconditions for the ceasefire. Despite the political maneuvers and the unclear ceasefire, fierce military confrontations continue. This opens the door for many possibilities. One possibility is reaching a permanent ceasefire, which is difficult to attain, and the second possibility is an obvious escalation in the military operations.
ثابت لإطلاق النار وهو أمر صعب وأما تصعيد واضح في المواجهات العسكرية. رفيق نصر الله قناة أبو ظبي بيروت.
Prime Minister Olmert made it clear today that the decision to temporarily halt airstrikes in Lebanon was of Israeli initiative and not a surrender to U.S. demands, as many described it. Meanwhile, ground troops continue to amass along the northern border in preparation for intense ground activity in the area. Senior IDF sources estimate that Israel needs about 1 more week to complete its military operation in Lebanon. We get more on the latest developments from IBA's Eli Wagerlunter.
The temporary ceasefire announced late last night has 2 components. One is a 48-hour flyover ceasefire, which went into effect at 2 a.m. this morning. The timeout allows the Army time to conduct an investigation into the events surrounding the airstrike in Qana. The other is a 24-hour ceasefire as a humanitarian gesture offered by Israel that allows residents of southern Lebanon who want to flee northward to be able to do so. Villagers in cars, buses, and pickup trucks flooded out of South Lebanon this morning, heading northward, even while some people headed the other way to check on their homes or help relatives in battered villages. 2 UN aid convoys left Beirut for Tyre and Qana. The Halt and Air Force attacks is not an across-the-board military ceasefire. What is still being allowed are continued strikes against targets that present a threat to Israel and its troops, including rocket launchers, vehicles transporting ammunition, Hezbollah fighters, weapon stores, and Hezbollah assets. What is off-limits are attacks on buildings that were not identified as being part of efforts to strike Israel, even if, for example, there is ammunition or Hezbollah fighters inside, as determined by military intelligence. Indeed, IDF ground operations will continue as before. With the diplomatic clock ticking, the Army believes that it has about a week to complete the military operation in Lebanon. It is therefore planning to significantly expand ground operations and boost the activities of its Armor and Infantry Corps in order to complete the demolition of Hezbollah positions along the border by Thursday. In today's fighting, 3 soldiers were lightly wounded when Hezbollah gunmen fired anti-tank rockets at them during battles in the Lebanese village of Taiba. In the meantime, the issue of what exactly took place in Qana yesterday is in much dispute. The IDF confirms that it struck the building where the casualties occurred, but say they did so between midnight and 1 a.m. yesterday, and that the building apparently did not collapse until 6 to 7 hours later at around 7 a.m. Senior IAF officers say that the building collapse could have been caused by an unexploded missile or by a Hezbollah-planted explosive device. Army officials say close to 150 Katyusha rockets had been fired from the Lebanese village over the past 20 days, and that Hezbollah had hidden rocket launchers in civilian buildings in the village. The investigation continues. Eli Wogelanter, IBA News.
U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice wanted it to be known that she had won the temporary suspension from Israel in the wake of the international outcry over the Qana bombing. This morning, before leaving Jerusalem on her way home, Rice briefed reporters, saying she had been deeply grieved by the tragic losses she had witnessed, especially the deaths of children, Lebanese and Israelis.
Israel and Lebanon. This morning, as I head back to Washington, I take with me an emerging consensus on what is necessary for both an urgent ceasefire and a lasting settlement. I am convinced we can achieve both this week, and I am convinced that only by achieving both will the Lebanese people finally be able to control their country and their future, and the people of Israel finally be able to live free from the threat of attack from terrorist groups in Lebanon. Based on what we have accomplished and the urgency of this situation, we will call for United Nations Security Council action this week on a comprehensive settlement that includes 3 parts: a ceasefire, the political principles that provide for a long-term settlement, and the authorization of an international force to support the Lebanese army in keeping the peace.
In a tense and stormy session, the Knesset interrupted its summer recess this morning to hold a special debate on the events in the north. Defense Minister Amir Peretz said Israel will not agree to an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon because that would lead to a resumption of hostilities in just a few months from now. Peretz also said Israel would insist that any multinational force in southern Lebanon would be a robust one with the power to act against the terrorists. This war was forced on us, said the defense minister. We didn't choose it, but we are defending our homes, and we will be victorious. He lashed out at Hezbollah for targeting Israel's population centers while using Lebanese men, women, and children as a defensive shield. Peretz stressed that no IDF soldier has ever been given an order to harm civilians. The defense minister was repeatedly heckled by Arab legislators who denounced the Qana bombings. United Arab List MKs Ibrahim Sarsour and Talib Hassana were removed from the plenum by Knesset Speaker Dalia Itzik. Aside from the Israeli Arab parties, the Knesset offered its full support to continuing Israel's counteroffensive in Lebanon against Hezbollah and its Syrian-Iranian patrons. This following Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's decision to temporarily halt airstrikes in Lebanon.
We can take it upon ourselves to stop the fire for 48 hours, and during this time to start working on the political issues. At the same time, I think that will give us the possibility, while we deal with the political issues, to also agree with the United States and other countries that we have to continue to do the job. In other words, the 48 hours can be used by Israel for diplomatic efforts.
We have also to understand that our enemies enjoy when there are victims among civilian population on both sides. In fact, it's very unusual enemy, very unusual situation. Terrorist organization is becoming stronger when civilians are killed by terrorists on our side and by us on their side. So the only way to stop this killing of civilians or used as a shield on their side. The only way to stop this war and to bring security to us and to Lebanese is to destroy the military machine military operation of Hezbollah.
The temporary ceasefire, the temporary reduction in the air assault on the terror targets is a mistake. Everybody knows that what happened in Qana was a cynical use of the miserable civilians as a light shield for the terrorists. It's the Hezbollah who pretended to be the defender of the Lebanese civilians, appeared to be the great murderer and killer.
Israel should occupy south of Lebanon 2 weeks ago in order to end the daily bombardments of Israeli cities and towns all over the north of Israel.
The first IDF soldier who refused to serve in reserve duty in the Lebanon War was sentenced to 28 days in military prison. 32-year-old Captain Amir Fester, an officer in the Shimshon Brigade, arrived at his base after receiving his call-up notice, but said he would not take part in a war that he claimed harms innocent people. The IDF strongly condemned the officer, saying the Army views refusal to serve, especially during wartime, with utmost severity. In the statement issued earlier today, the IDF said that officers do not choose their missions and should serve as an example to their soldiers.
The latest news on the Israel-Hezbollah conflict has Hezbollah hit an Israeli warship with rockets off the coast of the South Lebanese port city of Tyre on Monday. Hezbollah movement said in a statement the attack was the start of its retaliation for Sunday's bombing of a building in Qana. No word has been released on the fate of the crew of 53 Zionists on the warship. Hezbollah's statement said this is part of their revenge against their enemy. This came after an enraged Lebanon was plunged into mourning on Monday for the victims of an Israeli bombardment on the southern village of Qana.
Banks and public offices were closed and flags flew at half-mast on a national day of mourning in memory of those killed in Sunday's attack, 30 of them children, the biggest single loss of life since Israel unleashed its firepower on Lebanon almost 3 weeks ago. Meanwhile, fierce fighting was ongoing Monday between Lebanon's resistance forces and the Zionist troops. The Zionists fired artillery shells into both the villages in southeastern Lebanon as part of their massive aerial bombardment across the war-weary country. Kafar and Al-Adesiyah villages along the frontier were the scene of today's battles, where Hezbollah in retaliation demolished 3 tanks deployed by the Israeli troops. A Lebanese soldier was also killed today and 3 wounded by Israeli naval fire north of the port city of Tyre, while Israeli warplanes went into action despite a pledge to halt air raids temporarily.
Israel has rejected mounting pressure for a ceasefire in its 20-day-old war on Hezbollah, despite global outrage over Qana attack. Emotions are still running high while the Zionist regime's atrocities continue in South Lebanon. Demonstrators took to the streets around the world to vent their anger over the ongoing tragic incidents, including Sunday's air raid on the Lebanese village of Qana, which left 52 civilians, 30 of them children, killed.
In Syria, hundreds of women protested in Damascus, some carrying tiny coffins, symbolizing the dead children. Bush, you coward, and down with the United States, chanted the crowds. Back home, Iranian women staged rallies in several cities across the country to denounce the massacre of innocent civilians in Lebanon and occupied Palestine. The demonstrators also denounced the United States' support for the Israeli regime. Similar rallies were also staged in France, Kuwait, India, Singapore, Argentina, Turkey, Iraq, Belgium, and Jordan.
Egyptian Mufti Ali Gum'a said that the battle by Lebanon's Hezbollah against Israel is to defend Lebanon and not terrorism. He added that it was important to stand together in support of Hezbollah and the Lebanese people. Meanwhile, Egypt's prominent mosques witnessed many demonstrations which stressed support for the resistance in Lebanon and Palestine.
Demonstrations, rallies, chants and signs expressing anger toward the occupation's crimes in Lebanon and Palestine filled many of Egypt's mosques following the Friday prayers. They expressed their support of the resistance, which has become a symbol for resolve, pride and dignity. The demonstrations are angry toward the silence of Arab regimes and toward international collaboration with Israel. The most prominent was a demonstration by the Muslim Brotherhood in the Giza province, which was held at a public square in order to help create similar demonstrations in other mosques and squares. The demonstrators stressed their support of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the Palestinian resistance, which they consider as the only way towards liberation.
This demonstration is being staged by the Muslim Brotherhood, and its purpose is to spread more demonstrations throughout Cairo rather than confine our activities to Al-Azhar Mosque.
The demonstration is to express our solidarity and support of the great Islamic resistance in Lebanon, led by Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, as well as the great Islamic resistance in Palestine, led by Khaled Meshal.
The Muslim Brotherhood in its demonstrations was careful to emphasize the unity of all Muslims, both Shiites and Sunnis. They stressed that the sectarian fatwa that was issued against the Shiites serves the Zionist project and not the Muslims, and that the Shiites and Sunnis will liberate Jerusalem together.
We will not allow those who want to divide the Muslim nation along Shiite and Sunni lines. They are all Muslims. They are all freedom fighters who will liberate Palestine from the sea to the river and will liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
We as Muslims have no disagreements on this issue. We must be one unit, just as they fight us as one unit in Lebanon. They are fighting this aggression and keeping it from reaching us, so the least we can do is not support their enemies.
The demonstrations and protests are increasing day after day as the assault on the Lebanese and Palestinian peoples continues unchecked, while international governments and organizations continue to support it. The people who participated in these demonstrations want to make sure their voices are heard by those concerned, especially the Islamic resistance, which they view as the only way to confront the Zionist aggression.
The United Nations released a statement expressing its regret for the human loss as a result of the Qana massacre in southern Lebanon, but stopped short of condemning the Israeli entity due to opposition by the United States.
The United Nations resolution regarding the Qana massacre in southern Lebanon is yet another disappointment. Once again, it did not condemn the Israeli entity for this savage massacre, which shows that this organization is controlled by the United States and is driven by its agenda. What took place in Qana confirmed that Israel wants to carry out aggressions, kill innocent civilians, and destroy Lebanon's infrastructure. Meanwhile, the United Nations Security Council felt that an expression of regret over the human loss from the Qana massacre was sufficient.
The Security Council is shocked and very disturbed by the Israeli Defense Forces' strike on a residential building in Qana in southern Lebanon, which killed dozens of civilians, especially children, and it wounded many others.
Bowing to Washington's desires, the UN Security Council removed the stronger language that was included in the first draft of the statement, which described the bombing of Qana as unacceptable. This also happened in the middle of last week after 4 UN monitors were killed by an Israeli bombing of southern Lebanon.
said that they wanted to.
We oppose any language that predetermines what happened. We ask that this language is removed from the statement that calls for an immediate end to the war operations.
وبالقدر الذي أكدت فيه مجزرة قنا
The Qana massacre not only shows that the Israeli occupation's objective is to destroy all of Lebanon, but also reveals its aggression and disrespect of international laws, including the Fourth Geneva Convention, which calls for protecting civilians during war. The massacre also proves the absence of a just position by the international community, and that the text of international resolutions were drafted by countries whose aim is to serve their interests. The international position in the Qana massacre also shows that oppressed nations should not place much hope in international resolutions, but rather depend on themselves to regain their legitimate rights, which they were deprived of.
At least 10 Iraqis were killed and others were wounded during gunfire clashes and a car bomb explosion in the cities of Mosul, Kirkuk, and Baghdad. 25 Iraqi workers were kidnapped by armed assailants in the center of the capital.
للوهلة الأولى لا تبدو أحياء عراقية كالمنصور واليرموك أماكن مهيئة للقيام بأعمال عنف.
From the first impression, it does not appear that Iraqi neighborhoods such as Mansour and Yarmouk were expecting violent attacks. But armed assailants in Iraq did not spare these two neighborhoods in their operations, which this time targeted Iraqi officials. In the Mansour neighborhood, an advisor to the Iraqi Ministry of Health was assassinated by a car bomb. A general in the Iraqi intelligence was killed by gunshots from unknown attackers in the Yarmouk neighborhood. Al-Mosul also witnessed violence. 4 Iraqi soldiers were killed and 4 others were injured by an explosion of a suicide bomber driving a booby-trapped car at a checkpoint in the city. In Baghdad, in the area of Arsad, 25 Iraqi workers were kidnapped by unknown assailants wearing Iraqi police commando uniforms. The kidnapped employees worked for the Iraqi American Chamber of Commerce.
في غرفة التجارة والصناعات العراقية الأمريكية من قبل مسلحين مجهولين يرتدون زي مغاوير الشرطة العراقية في منطقة العرصات.
The cars came from the alley to the Commerce office. They were accompanied by an Iraqi army vehicle equipped with American weapons. They surrounded the guards that were at the door and the employees inside. Shortly after, they took the workers out of the building, handcuffed them, then led them into the cars and drove them away.
وعلى الجانب الآخر أعلن الجيش الأمريكي مقتل 4 من جنود.
The United States Army announced that 4 of its soldiers died in military operations in Al-Anbar province in western Iraq. Meanwhile, United States and Iraqi forces carried out security operations, arresting 25 armed men in the Taifa village on suspicion of being involved in the attack on a popular market in Al-Muhammadiyah south of Baghdad, which killed 60 Iraqis.
60 عراقيا.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. programs which connect you to the world.